The young Cytherian soldiers sat in perfect rows, their purple scales gleaming under the harsh lights of the training hall. They watched Zektar with wide eyes, eager to hear stories of glory and conquest. The old warrior stood before them, his battle scars marking years of service to the Empire. But instead of pride, his face showed something else, something that made the young ones shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You want to hear about the humans," Zektar said slowly. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. "You think they are just another weak species we can crush under our boots. That is what I thought too 6 months ago." He began to pace, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "The High Command gave me 30 of our best fighters. Elite warriors, each one worth 10 soldiers from lesser species. Our target was simple, a human mining colony on Kepler 442b. Intelligence reports said maybe 200 humans, mostly workers. No military base, no weapons, easy prey." One young soldier raised his hand. "Commander, how many humans did you capture?" Zektar stopped pacing. His laugh was bitter and cold. "Capture? Child, by the end of that day I was the one running for my life." The room fell silent. This was not the story they expected to hear. "We approached the planet in 3 dropships," Zektar continued. "Standard assault formation. The colony sat in a valley between 2 mountains perfect for surrounding them. Their buildings were simple metal structures, nothing fancy. I could see humans moving around like insects, going about their daily work. They looked so small, so weak." He activated a holographic display showing the mining colony. The young soldiers leaned forward to get a better look. I opened communications with their leader, a man named Jake Morrison. I expected him to surrender immediately when he saw our ships. Instead, he laughed at me. Laughed. Then he said something I will never forget. "Boys, looks like we got ourselves some uninvited guests. Time to show them what human hospitality looks like." Zektar's eyes grew distant as he remembered that day. We landed our troops in the standard pattern, surrounded the colony, cut off all escape routes. By every military rule we knew, they were trapped, helpless. But the humans did not act helpless. One of the soldiers asked, "What did they do, Commander?" "They turned their mining equipment into weapons," Zektar said. "Plasma cutters became plasma rifles. Ore haulers became armored vehicles. Drilling explosives became grenades. In minutes, these defenseless miners had armed themselves better than some planetary militias." The hologram changed to show the battle that followed. Cytherian troops, advancing, then suddenly falling back under unexpected fire. The first lesson the humans taught me was this: there's no such thing as a human civilian. Every one of them is a potential warrior. A woman named Lisa Grant was their chief engineer. She should have been hiding in a bunker, waiting for rescue. Instead, she rigged an overloaded fusion drill to explode just as my second dropship was landing. Zektar's voice grew quiet. The explosion took out 12 of my best warriors. Lisa Grant died in the blast, but she smiled as she triggered it. Smiled. What kind of species sacrifices their own people so easily? The young soldiers looked shocked. In Cytherian culture, civilians never fought. That was what soldiers were for. But that was just the beginning, Zektar said. The humans had spent years on that planet. They knew every rock, every cave, every tunnel. They used the mining shafts like highways under our feet. We would secure an area, only to have humans pop up behind us from holes in the ground. He showed them tactical displays of the battle. Red dots representing Cytherian forces, blue dots for humans. The blue dots seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. Jake Morrison coordinated their defense from the main building. We tried to take it 3 times. Each time the humans pushed us back. Not with superior weapons or numbers, but with pure determination. They fought like cornered animals, except animals eventually give up. Humans never did. A young soldier asked, "Commander, how did they defeat trained warriors with mining tools?" Zektar smiled grimly. They thought differently than we did. We saw obstacles. They saw opportunities. When we destroyed their power generator, they used manual tools. When we cut their communications, they used mirrors to signal each other. with sunlight. When we blocked their main entrance, they made new ones with explosives. The hologram showed the colony from above, with new holes and passages appearing throughout the battle. The worst part was their voices, Zektar said. Most species become quiet when facing death. They accept their fate. But humans got louder. They sang songs. They shouted encouragement to each other. They made jokes while bullets flew over their heads. Jake Morrison kept talking on every frequency, telling his people they could win, that they would win. He paused, lost in the memory. One of their miners, an old man named Bill Carter, had been shot twice. He was bleeding, could barely stand, but he kept working on some device in the corner. My warriors ignored him because he looked harmless. Foolish mistake. What was he building? A soldier asked. A signal booster, Zektar replied. He was amplifying their distress signal, calling for help from human ships in the system. We did not know there were any human ships nearby. Another intelligence failure. The hologram now showed space around the planet, with small green dots, approaching. 3 human patrol ships arrived just as we thought we had won. Small ships, nothing compared to our dropships. But they coordinated with the colonists on the ground. Suddenly we were fighting enemies above and below at the same time. Zektar's voice grew heavy. The patrol ships were commanded by Captain Ellen Davis. She was young, maybe half my age. But she flew like she had been born in space. Her ships danced around our heavy dropships, striking and running, never staying still long enough for our guns to lock on. "Did you retreat then, Commander?" asked one of the young soldiers. "Not yet," Zektar said. "I was still thinking like a Catherian. I thought we could overwhelm them with superior numbers and firepower. I ordered my remaining forces to concentrate on the main building where Jake Morrison was directing the defense. The hologram showed Catherian troops massing for a final assault. That is when the humans taught me their most important lesson," Zektar said quietly. "We broke through their outer defenses. We had Jake Morrison trapped in his command center with maybe 20 other humans. I called for his surrender, promising him honorable treatment as a prisoner of war. And he refused?" a soldier guessed. "Worse," Zektar said. He asked me a question that still haunts my sleep. He said, "Commander, do you have children?" I told him yes, I had 3 offspring back on our homeworld. Then he said, "So do we. And we will die before we let you take this place from us. But here is what you need to understand. We do not have to win today. We just have to make you pay such a high price that you never want to come back." The room was completely silent now. Even the air circulation system seemed quieter. "Jake Morrison was right," Zektar continued. "By the time I ordered the retreat, I had lost 18 warriors, more than half my force destroyed by miners and 3 small patrol ships. But the cost was not just in numbers, it was in understanding." He turned off the holographic display and faced his young soldiers directly. "I learned that day that humans do not fight the way civilized species fight. They do not calculate odds and surrender when defeat becomes likely. They fight as if losing is not possible, even when it clearly is. They turn their weakness into strength, their fear into fury, their desperation into determination." Zektar sat down heavily, suddenly looking older than his years. That mining colony should have fallen in an hour. Instead, it cost me most of my command and taught me that everything we thought we knew about humans was wrong. They are not weak. They are not cowardly. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and we had just declared war on them. The young soldiers sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had heard. This was not the glorious victory story they had expected. "Commander," one finally asked, "what happened to Jake Morrison and the colonists?" Zektar smiled for the first time since he had begun speaking, but it was not a happy smile. "They are all still there, building their colony larger and stronger than before. Jake Morrison was promoted to planetary governor. Lisa Grant has a monument in the center of town, and every human child on that world learns her story, learns that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to protect what matters most." He stood up slowly, his old wounds aching with the memory. "That was just the first battle, young ones. The first lesson the humans taught us. There are 4 more stories I must tell you, each one more terrifying than the last, because the humans were just getting started. The training hall remained silent as Zektar walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned back one final time. Remember this above all else. Never underestimate a human. They will surprise you every time, and the surprise is rarely pleasant. With that, the old warrior left his young soldiers to think about what they had heard. Outside, the stars shone coldly in the void, and somewhere among them, humans were building, learning, and preparing for whatever came next. The next morning, Zektar returned to the training hall. The young soldiers were already waiting, sitting straighter than before. Word had spread about his first story. They no longer looked eager for tales of easy victory. They looked worried. Yesterday, I told you about our first mistake, Zektar began. Today I will tell you about our second, and how it nearly cost me my life. He activated the holographic display again. This time, it showed a vast asteroid field, rocks floating in the darkness of space like sleeping giants. 3 weeks after the mining colony disaster, High Command was angry. They could not believe that elite Catherian warriors had been defeated by human miners. They called it a fluke, a lucky accident. They decided to prove that humans were still weak by attacking their supply lines. Zektar pointed to several glowing dots moving through the asteroid field. Human cargo ships traveled this route every few days, carrying supplies to their outer colonies. The asteroids provided perfect cover for an ambush. No escape routes, no place to hide. It should have been simple. One of the young soldiers raised his hand. Commander, how many ships did High Command send? A full battle group, Zektar replied. 50 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers. I commanded the Advanced Scout Squadron, 12 fast attack ships. Our job was to identify targets and coordinate the attack. Against a few cargo ships, it seemed like overwhelming force. The hologram changed to show the Catherian fleet spreading out through the asteroid field, taking positions. We detected the human convoy right on schedule, Zektar continued. 5 cargo ships moving slowly through the asteroids. Long-range scans showed they were fully loaded with supplies. Perfect targets. I reported to Fleet Commander Korthak that we had found easy prey. He paused, his expression growing darker. The convoy was led by a cargo ship called the Desert Rose. Its captain was a human named Ryan Murphy. When we intercepted his communications, he sounded exactly like what we expected, frightened, desperate, begging for mercy. The display showed the human ships, small and seemingly helpless among the massive asteroids. Captain Murphy sent distress signals on all frequencies, Zektar said. He pleaded with us not to attack. He said his ships carried medical supplies and food for colonists. He offered to surrender without a fight. Everything he did made him look weak and scared. A young soldier asked, "Did you believe him, Commander?" Zektar laughed bitterly. I wanted to believe him. After the mining colony, I thought maybe we had just faced unusually brave humans. Captain Murphy seemed more normal, afraid of death, willing to surrender to save his crew. It made me feel better about our chances. The hologram showed Catherian ships moving into attack formation around the human convoy. Fleet Commander Korthak ordered the attack to begin, Zektar continued. My scouts moved in first, weapons ready. The human cargo ships just sat there, engines powered down, looking helpless. Captain Murphy kept talking on the radio, begging us to spare his people. He stopped pacing and looked directly at his young audience. That is when the asteroids came alive. The hologram exploded into motion. What had appeared to be normal rocks suddenly sprouted weapons and began firing at the Catherian ships. The humans had hollowed out dozens of asteroids and turned them into hidden weapons platforms, Zektar explained. Each one looked exactly like a normal rock on our sensors. But inside, they had installed plasma cannons, missile launchers, and shield generators. One of the soldiers gasped. How is that possible? How long would that take? Months, Zektar replied. Maybe years. The humans had been preparing this trap for a very long time. They knew we would come for their supply lines eventually, so they turned the entire asteroid field into a weapons system. The display showed the battle unfolding. Catherian ships that had thought they were hidden were suddenly exposed and under attack from all sides. But that was not the worst part, Zektar said. The worst part was realizing that Captain Murphy had been lying to us from the beginning. The Desert Rose was not a cargo ship at all. The hologram zoomed in on the lead human vessel. Its hull was opening up, revealing hidden weapon bays and fighter launch tubes. The Desert Rose was a military command ship disguised as a freighter, Zektar explained. Captain Murphy was not a frightened merchant. He was bait. The entire convoy was bait designed to draw us into the perfect killing zone. A young soldier asked, "Who was really commanding the trap?" "Admiral Sam Rodriguez," Zektar said. "He was hiding in a command asteroid at the center of the field. While we focused on the fake convoy, he was coordinating the real attack. Every asteroid weapons platform, every hidden fighter squadron, every piece of the trap was under his control." The hologram showed the full scope of the human plan. Dozens of asteroid bases, all connected by communication lines, all working together. The humans had also planted an engineer named Kate Williams in the asteroid field months earlier, Zektar continued. She designed the entire network of hidden bases. She made sure every asteroid looked normal from the outside while being deadly on the inside. He shook his head in amazement. Kate Williams thought like no military engineer I had ever encountered. She did not just build weapons platforms. She built an entire invisible fleet that could appear and disappear at will. The battle display showed Catherian ships being destroyed one by one as they tried to escape the trap. My scout squadron was caught in the middle of it all, Zektar said. Suddenly we were surrounded by enemies that had not existed moments before. Rocks that should have been cover became death traps. Space that should have been empty was full of human fighters. One of the soldiers asked, "How did you escape, Commander?" Zektar's expression grew grim. "I almost did not. My ship was damaged, and my squadron was being destroyed around me." That is when I learned another lesson about humans. They do not just fight with weapons. They fight with words too. The hologram showed communication frequencies lighting up with human chatter. Captain Murphy started talking again, Zektar explained. But now his voice was different, confident, mocking. He said, "Commander Zektar, I hope you are enjoying our little surprise. We have been waiting so long to show you what human hospitality really looks like." The young soldiers looked confused. One asked, "How did he know your name?" "That is what terrified me most," Zektar replied. "The humans had been studying us. They knew our ships, our tactics, even our individual commanders. While we saw them as primitive aliens, they saw us as a puzzle to be solved." The display showed more human fighters emerging from hidden bases throughout the asteroid field. "Admiral Rodriguez spoke to me directly," Zektar continued. "He said, Commander, you seem to be having engine trouble. Would you like us to help you with that?" Then his fighters started herding my damaged ship toward what looked like empty space. Zektar paused, remembering the fear he had felt in that moment. "I thought they were going to finish me off," he said. "Instead, they were showing me something. Admiral Rodriguez wanted me to see the full scope of their operation. He guided me past asteroid after asteroid, each one revealing hidden weapons and fighters as I passed. The hologram showed the path Zektar's ship had taken, revealing the massive scale of the human preparation. There were not just dozens of hidden bases, Zektar said. There were hundreds. The entire asteroid field had been turned into a single massive weapon system, and we had flown right into the center of it like blind fools. A young soldier asked, "Why did they let you escape, Commander?" Zektar smiled grimly. "Admiral Rodriguez told me exactly why. He said, 'Commander, I am letting you live for one reason. I want you to go back to your superiors and tell them what you saw here. Tell them that this is what happens when they underestimate humans. Tell them that we can turn empty space itself into a weapon.'" The battle display showed the destruction of the Catherian battle group. Of 50 ships, only a handful escaped. Fleet Commander Korthak died when his flagship was destroyed by asteroid-based missiles, Zektar said. "Most of my fellow scouts were killed trying to escape through what they thought were safe passages. Only 3 of us made it out alive." He turned off the holographic display and faced his audience. The humans had spent months preparing that trap, he said. They studied our patrol patterns, learned our tactics, predicted exactly how we would attack. Then they built a weapon system that could appear and disappear like ghosts in the void. One of the soldiers asked, "Commander, how could they hide so much from our sensors?" "That is the question that kept me awake for weeks," Zektar replied. "The answer is that humans think about warfare differently than we do. We build obvious things, big ships, powerful weapons, strong fortifications. Humans build invisible things, traps, deceptions, psychological warfare." He began pacing again, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "Kate Williams did not just hide weapons inside asteroids," he explained. "She made those weapons part of the asteroids themselves. They did not look like artificial constructions because they were not artificial. They were natural rocks that had been made into weapons without changing their appearance." The young soldiers looked amazed and frightened at the same time. "Captain Murphy did not just pretend to be afraid," Zektar continued. "He became afraid, or at least he made us believe he was afraid." On the third day, the young soldiers were already in their seats when Zektar arrived. Their faces were pale and serious. They had been talking among themselves, sharing fears about what they might hear next. The old warrior noticed their changed mood and nodded approvingly. "Good," he said. "You are finally starting to understand. Fear is the beginning of wisdom when it comes to humans." He activated the holographic display, showing a blue and green planet surrounded by massive Catherian warships. After the asteroid trap disaster, the High Command was furious, Zektar began. They could not accept that humans were outsmarting us at every turn. They decided to end the war with overwhelming force by attacking the human fortress world of New Terra. The display zoomed in to show a heavily fortified planet with orbital defense platforms and ground-based weapon systems. New Terra was humanity's most protected world, Zektar explained. It held 20 million humans and served as their main military headquarters. High Command thought that if we could break New Terra, the rest of humanity would surrender. One of the young soldiers asked, "How many ships did we send, Commander?" 300 warships, Zektar replied. "The largest fleet ever assembled by the Catherian Empire. I was promoted to ground commander after surviving the asteroid trap. My job was to lead the invasion once our ships broke through their defenses." The hologram showed the massive Catherian fleet approaching the planet, while smaller human ships tried to defend it. "The space battle lasted 3 days, Zektar continued. "Our ships were bigger and more powerful. Slowly, we pushed back the human fleet and destroyed their orbital platforms. By the 4th day, we had achieved total space superiority. The planet was ours for the taking." He paused, his expression growing troubled. "That is when we met General Peter Hayes." The display showed a middle-aged human in military uniform standing before massive fortifications. "General Hayes commanded the planetary defense," Zektar explained. "When we offered terms of surrender, he sent back a simple message: 'Come and take it.' 3 words that would haunt me for the next 8 months. A young soldier looked confused. 8 months, Commander? How long could a siege possibly last?" Zektar laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is what I thought too. A planet surrounded by 300 warships, cut off from all supplies, should fall within weeks. I prepared my ground forces for a quick victory celebration. The hologram changed to show Catherian dropships landing on the planet's surface, beginning the invasion. "The first month went according to plan," Zektar said. "We captured several cities and pushed the human forces back toward their main fortress. General Hayes kept retreating, giving up territory without major battles. I thought he was just trying to delay the inevitable." The display showed Catherian forces advancing across the planet's surface, taking control of more and more territory. "But something strange was happening," Zektar continued. "Even though we controlled most of the planet, we were losing soldiers every day. Small groups of humans would attack our supply lines, then disappear before we could respond. They called it guerrilla warfare," one of the soldiers asked. "Were they military units, Commander?" "That is what made it so terrifying," Zektar replied. "Some were soldiers, but many were ordinary citizens. Teachers, farmers, shop owners, all of them fighting like trained warriors. A woman named Maria Santos was a school teacher before the invasion. During the siege, she led night raids that destroyed dozens of our vehicles. The hologram showed small groups of humans attacking Cytherian positions under cover of darkness. Maria Santos and her civilian fighters knew the planet better than we did, Zektar explained. They used hidden tunnels, secret supply caches, and safe houses that had been prepared years in advance. Every human on the planet was part of their defense network. He shook his head in amazement. Maria Santos would conduct a raid that killed 20 of my soldiers. Then the next morning, she would be on the radio reading stories to human children, telling them not to lose hope. Her voice was calm and gentle, like she was discussing the weather instead of a war. The young soldiers looked disturbed by this image of ordinary people becoming deadly fighters. The real nightmare began in the second month, Zektar continued. A human soldier named Alex Turner started what they called the Invisible War. He led a team of specialists who seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. The display showed Cytherian supply convoys being attacked by unseen enemies. Alex Turner's team would strike at night when our sensors could barely detect them, Zektar explained. They destroyed fuel depots, sabotaged communication equipment, and eliminated key personnel. We never saw them coming and rarely saw them leaving. A young soldier asked, "How could they hide from our thermal sensors?" "They had been studying our technology for months," Zektar replied. Alex Turner knew exactly how our sensors worked and how to avoid them. His team used special suits that matched the surrounding temperature. They moved like animals, crawling through mud and hiding in places we would never think to look. The hologram showed heat signatures that appeared and disappeared seemingly at random. But Alex Turner did not just attack our supplies, Zektar said. He attacked our minds. He would leave messages at the sites of his attacks, written in perfect Cytherian. Messages that showed he knew details about our personal lives, our families back home, our individual fears. The display showed examples of these psychological warfare messages. One message was addressed to me personally, Zektar continued. It mentioned my 3 children by name and described the school they attended on our homeworld. Alex Turner had somehow learned everything about my family. The message ended with a simple question. "Commander, is this war worth their lives?" The young soldiers shifted uncomfortably. The idea of enemies knowing their personal information was deeply unsettling. By the 3rd month, our siege was falling apart, Zektar said. We controlled the surface of the planet, but the humans controlled everything underneath. A human engineer named Colonel Linda Brooks had been building a tunnel network under our feet for decades. The hologram showed a cross-section view of the planet, revealing an enormous underground city. Colonel Brooks had designed the most incredible tunnel system I have ever seen, Zektar explained. Miles of passages connected every major city, every military base, every supply depot on the planet. The humans could move entire armies underground without us ever knowing. He paused to let this sink in. We thought we were besieging them, but they were actually surrounding us from below. The display showed human forces emerging from hidden tunnels behind Cytherian positions. Colonel Brooks called it the Underground War, Zektar continued. While we fought on the surface, she commanded battles in a world we could not even see. Her tunnels had their own power systems, their own communication networks, their own supply lines. One of the soldiers asked, "How long had they been building these tunnels?" 20 years, Zektar replied. Colonel Brooks had convinced the human government to prepare for exactly this kind of siege decades before we ever arrived. She knew that humans could not match us in space, so she made sure they could fight us underground. The hologram showed the incredible scope of the tunnel network, spanning entire continents. The worst part was the waiting, Zektar said. Days would pass with no attacks, no movement, no sound. Then suddenly our rear guard would be wiped out by enemies who seemed to come from nowhere. We were always on edge, always afraid, never knowing when or where the next attack would come. He began pacing, his claws clicking nervously on the floor. General Hayes used our own siege against us, Zektar explained. He turned our blockade into a prison. We could not leave because High Command expected us to win. We could not advance, because the humans were too well prepared. We could only wait and watch our forces slowly disappear. The display showed casualty reports climbing steadily over the months. By the 5th month, I was losing soldiers faster than they could be replaced, Zektar said. Not in big battles, but in small attacks that happened every single day. A squad would disappear while on patrol. A supply convoy would be found destroyed with no survivors. A communication post would go silent and never respond again. A young soldier asked, "Did you ever consider retreating, Commander?" Zektar stopped, pacing. Every day, but General Hayes was conducting psychological warfare against our leadership too. He would broadcast messages directly to our fleet, speaking perfect Cytherian, explaining exactly how he was defeating us. The hologram showed General Hayes addressing the Cytherian forces. General Hayes told us that we were welcome to leave anytime we wanted, Zektar said. But he also told us that if we stayed, he would continue to bleed us slowly until we had nothing left. He was not just fighting a war, he was teaching us a lesson about the cost of attacking humanity. The display showed graphs of Cytherian casualties steadily climbing, while human losses remained relatively low. The humans were losing too, Zektar continued, but they seemed to accept their losses as necessary sacrifices. Every human who died was immediately replaced by someone else ready to fight. They never seemed to run out of people willing to die for their cause. He sat down heavily, looking older than his years. The 4th day brought rain to the Cytherian homeworld. The young soldiers listened to it drumming against the windows of the training hall as they waited for Zektar to begin. When the old warrior entered, his scales looked darker in the dim light, and his scars seemed deeper than before. "The rain reminds me of that time," he said without greeting. It was always raining in space around the human supply routes. Not real rain, but debris from destroyed ships. Bits of metal and frozen air falling like tears through the void. He activated the holographic display showing star maps with shipping lanes marked in glowing lines. After the disaster at New Terra, High Command changed tactics, Zektar began. They decided that if we could not defeat humans in direct combat, we would starve them instead, cut off their supply lines, force them to surrender when their colonies ran out of food and fuel. The display showed Cytherian patrol routes intersecting human shipping lanes throughout the galaxy. It seemed like a perfect plan. Zektar continued. Humans needed constant supplies to maintain their far-flung colonies. Their cargo ships were slow and lightly armed, easy targets for our hunter-killer squadrons. One of the young soldiers asked, "Did you command these hunting missions, Commander?" "I led the most elite squadron," Zektar replied. 12 of our fastest ships crewed by our most experienced pilots. Our job was to find human supply convoys and destroy them before they could reach their destinations. The hologram showed sleek Cytherian ships patrolling through empty space, searching for prey. "For the first month, everything went according to plan," Zektar said. "We intercepted dozens of human cargo ships. Most surrendered without a fight when they saw our weapons. Others tried to run but could not escape our superior speed." The display showed successful attacks on human vessels, with Cytherian ships easily overwhelming their targets. "I began to think that maybe we had found the right approach," Zektar continued. "Space combat was different from ground fighting. In space, there were no tunnels to hide in, no civilians to provide support, no terrain to use for cover. Just ships and empty void." He paused, his expression growing darker. "I was wrong about that too." The hologram changed to show a new pattern of encounters, with human ships beginning to fight back more effectively. "The change started slowly," Zektar explained. Human cargo ships began carrying better weapons. Their crews started using new tactics that made them harder to catch. But most importantly, they stopped acting afraid. One of the soldiers asked, "What do you mean, Commander?" "Before, human crews would panic when we attacked," Zektar replied. "They would make mistakes, choose wrong escape routes, waste time with useless distress calls. But after a few weeks, they started acting like professional warriors instead of frightened merchants." The display showed human ships executing complex evasive maneuvers and coordinated defense patterns. "That is when I first encountered Captain Ellen Davis," Zektar said. "She commanded a ship called the Night Runner, supposedly a simple cargo hauler carrying medical supplies to outer colonies. The hologram focused on a medium-sized human vessel that looked like an ordinary freighter. Captain Davis seemed like an easy target, Zektar continued. Her ship was alone traveling through a region where we had destroyed 5 other cargo vessels in the past week. When my squadron surrounded her, I expected quick surrender. He shook his head slowly. Instead, Captain Davis sent me a message that chilled my blood. She said, "Commander Zektar, I have been waiting for you. Thank you for finally coming to play." The young soldiers shifted nervously. They were beginning to understand that any time a human seemed calm in the face of danger, something terrible was about to happen. "Captain Davis knew my name," Zektar said. "She knew my ship's identification codes. She knew how many vessels were in my squadron. While we had been hunting human cargo ships, the humans had been studying us." The hologram showed the Night Runner, suddenly revealing hidden weapons and launching fighters that had been concealed in its cargo bays. Captain Davis had been using her ship as bait, Zektar explained. The Night Runner was not a cargo vessel at all. It was a military ship disguised to look helpless. And Captain Davis was not a merchant. She was a hunter just like me. Tier. Display showed the battle that followed, with the human ship proving far more dangerous than it had appeared. The Night Runner fought like nothing I had ever seen, Zektar continued. Captain Davis flew patterns that should have been impossible for a ship that size. She seemed to know what we were going to do before we did it ourselves. One of the soldiers asked, "How could she predict your tactics, Commander?" "Because she had been watching us for weeks," Zektar replied. "Every attack we made, every ship we destroyed, every tactical decision we used, Captain Davis had recorded it all. She knew our patterns better than we did." The hologram showed tactical analysis data, with human intelligence tracking Cytherian patrol routes and combat methods. Captain Davis was not alone, Zektar said. She was part of a network of human ships that looked like cargo haulers but were actually disguised warships. They called themselves the Ghost Fleet. The display showed multiple human vessels throughout the galaxy, all appearing to be innocent merchants while secretly coordinating military operations. The Ghost Fleet was commanded by a pilot named Brad Thompson, Zektar continued. He flew a ship called the Phantom Strike that could appear and disappear like its name suggested. Brad Thompson had developed new technology that made his ship invisible to our sensors. The hologram showed empty space where sensors detected nothing, followed by sudden attacks from ships that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Brad Thompson's stealth technology was designed by a scientist named Dr. Rachel Stone, Zektar explained. She had been studying our sensor systems and found ways to fool them completely. Her ships could hide in plain sight right in front of us. A young soldier asked, "How is that possible, Commander?" Dr. Rachel Stone understood that our sensors looked for specific things, Zektar replied. Heat signatures, electromagnetic emissions, gravitational disturbances. She designed ships that could mask or eliminate all of these signs. The display showed technical diagrams of human stealth systems that seemed almost magical in their sophistication. But the technology was only part of it, Zektar continued. The real weapon was the psychological effect. Imagine hunting prey that can become invisible at will. Imagine being the predator, but knowing that something else might be stalking you. He began pacing, his claws clicking anxiously on the floor. Brad Thompson would appear just long enough to destroy one of my ships, then vanish before we could respond, Zektar said. Sometimes we would go days without seeing any human vessels. Then suddenly, 3 of our squadron would be destroyed by enemies we never detected. The hologram showed the steady attrition of Cytherian forces, with hunter squadrons gradually being eliminated by invisible opponents. The worst part was the uncertainty, Zektar explained. We never knew if the empty space around us was really empty. Every shadow, every sensor glitch, every strange reading could be a hidden human ship preparing to attack. One of the soldiers asked, "Did you try to adapt your tactics, Commander?" "We tried everything," Zektar replied. "New sensor arrays, different patrol patterns, larger squadron sizes. Nothing worked. The humans adapted faster than we did, always staying one step ahead of our countermeasures." The display showed increasingly desperate Cytherian attempts to locate and engage the Ghost Fleet. Captain Davis sent me regular messages during this time, Zektar said. Not threats or demands, just friendly conversations. She would ask about my family, comment on the weather back on our homeworld, discuss philosophical questions about the nature of war. The young soldiers looked confused. Why would she do that, Commander? Psychological warfare, Zektar replied. Captain Davis wanted me to know that she could contact me anytime she wanted, that she was always there, always watching, always one step ahead. It was more terrifying than any direct threat. The hologram showed communication logs between Zektar and Captain Davis, revealing an ongoing dialogue throughout their deadly game of cat and mouse. The conversations made it personal, Zektar explained. Captain Davis was not just destroying my ships. She was getting inside my head. She knew things about me that only family members should know. She had researched my entire life history. He stopped pacing and faced his audience directly. One day, Captain Davis asked me about my favorite meal from childhood, he said. The next day, I found that exact food waiting in my ship's galley, somehow delivered while we were in deep space. No one else could have gotten aboard my vessel. The soldiers looked genuinely frightened by this revelation. How did she do it, Commander? One whispered. I never found out, Zektar replied. But I realized that the humans were not just hunting my ships, they were hunting me personally. Captain Davis wanted me to understand that there was nowhere I could hide, nothing I could do that she could not counter. The display showed the final engagement between Zektar's forces and the Ghost Fleet. The end came when Brad Thompson decided to reveal himself, Zektar said. The Phantom Strike appeared directly in front of my flagship, close enough that I could see him through the cockpit window. He was smiling. On the fifth day, the training hall was completely silent when Zektar entered. The young soldiers had not spoken to each other while waiting. They sat with the stillness of people who had learned to fear what they might hear next. The old warrior looked at their faces and nodded slowly. Today I will tell you the most important story, he said quietly. The one that changed everything I believed about war, about strength, and about what it truly means to be dangerous. He activated the holographic display one final time. It showed the Catherian homeworld, beautiful and peaceful, surrounded by defensive stations and patrol fleets. After losing the Ghost Fleet War, High Command was desperate, Zektar began. Our forces were broken, our morale was shattered, and our enemies seemed to be everywhere at once. The Emperor himself ordered a final defensive strategy: pull all remaining forces back to protect our homeworld. The display showed Catherian ships retreating from across the galaxy, forming a massive defensive shell around their planet. We thought we were safe, Zektar continued. Our homeworld had the strongest defenses in the galaxy: orbital weapons platforms, asteroid fortresses, minefields that stretched for millions of miles. No enemy had ever come close to threatening our home, one of the young soldiers asked quietly. But the humans came anyway? They came, Zektar replied, but not the way we expected. The hologram changed to show a single human fleet approaching the Catherian system. It was smaller than anyone had anticipated. Admiral Tony Clark commanded the human expedition, Zektar explained. His fleet had only 50 ships, tiny compared to our defensive forces. When our sensors detected them, many of our commanders laughed. They thought the humans were either insane or suicidal. The display showed the massive Catherian defenses compared to the small human fleet. I was given command of the final defense, Zektar said. My job was to destroy the human fleet before it could reach our planet. With our overwhelming advantage, in numbers and firepower, it should have been simple. He paused, his expression growing troubled. Admiral Clark sent a message before the battle began. He requested permission to speak with our Emperor directly. He said he had terms for our surrender. The young soldiers looked shocked. Our surrender? One asked. That was exactly our reaction, Zektar replied. How could a tiny human fleet demand the surrender of our entire empire? We thought Admiral Clark was either bluffing or completely mad. The hologram showed the human message being broadcast to the Catherian leadership. Admiral Clark's message was simple, Zektar continued. He said that humans had no desire to destroy the Catherian people, but the war had to end. He offered terms that would allow us to keep our homeworld and most of our territory, in exchange for agreeing to never attack human colonies again. One of the soldiers asked, "What did the Emperor say?" "The Emperor laughed," Zektar replied. "He told Admiral Clark that 50 human ships could not threaten an empire of thousands of worlds. He ordered me to destroy the human fleet and end their delusions." The display showed Catherian forces moving to engage the human fleet. "The battle began as we expected," Zektar said. "Our ships outnumbered theirs 10 to 1. Our weapons were more powerful. Our defenses were stronger. For the first hour, everything went according to plan. The hologram showed the initial engagement, with Catherian forces appearing to have the advantage. Then Admiral Clark revealed why he had been so confident," Zektar continued. "The human fleet was not there to fight a traditional battle. They were there to demonstrate something that would change the war forever." The display suddenly showed new contacts appearing throughout the Catherian system. Not ships, but something else entirely. "Weapons platforms," Zektar explained. "Hundreds of them, hidden throughout our own system for months. While we had been fighting the Ghost Fleet in distant space, human engineers had been secretly placing weapon systems in our backyard." The young soldiers gasped. The idea of enemies operating in their home system was their worst nightmare. "Scientist named Dr. Barry Mitchell had developed a new type of weapon," Zektar said. "Devices so small our sensors could not detect them, but powerful enough to destroy entire planets. He had been planting them throughout our system while we focused on defending against the obvious threat." The hologram showed tiny devices attached to asteroids, space stations, and even some of our own ships. Dr. Mitchell's weapons were not just bombs, Zektar explained. They were connected to each other in a network that could be activated from anywhere in the galaxy. "Admiral Clark could have destroyed our homeworld at any time during the past 6 months, one of the soldiers asked in a terrified whisper. "Why didn't he?" Zektar looked at the young warrior with something that might have been pity. "That is the question that haunts me every day," he said. "Admiral Clark had the power to end our entire civilization with the push of a button. Instead, he chose to come here in person and offer us a chance to surrender with honor." The display showed the true scope of the human weapon network, with connections reaching every major Catherian installation. "A negotiator named Helen Foster explained the situation to our Emperor," Zektar continued. "She told him that humans had learned everything they needed to know about Catherian technology, tactics, and psychology. The war was already over. We just had not realized it yet." The hologram showed diplomatic communications between the human fleet and Catherian leadership. "Helen Foster was not threatening us," Zektar said. "She was educating us. She explained that humans could have ended the war at any point after the asteroid trap, but they chose to let it continue because they wanted us to learn something." A young soldier asked, "What did they want us to learn, Commander?" "That strength is not about the ability to destroy," Zektar replied. "It is about the wisdom to choose not to destroy when you have the power to do so." The room fell completely silent. Even the air circulation system seemed to have stopped. Commander Steve Parker was Admiral Clark's second-in-command. Zektar continued. "He showed us recordings of every battle we had fought, every victory we thought we had won, every defeat that had confused us. All of it had been carefully orchestrated by human commanders. The display showed battle analyses, revealing how humans had controlled the pace and outcome of every engagement. The mining colony could have been evacuated before we arrived," Zektar explained. "The asteroid trap could have destroyed our entire fleet instead of just most of it. The siege of New Terra could have ended in days if humans had used their most powerful weapons. The Ghost Fleet could have eliminated all of our hunting squadrons in the first week." He sat down heavily, looking older than ever before. "Every battle had been a lesson," he said quietly. "Humans were not fighting to defeat us. They were fighting to teach us. They wanted us to understand the cost of aggression, the futility of conquest, and the value of choosing peace over war." One of the soldiers asked, "What happened to our fleet, Commander?" "Admiral Clark gave me a choice," Zektar replied. "I could order my ships to attack his fleet and watch our homeworld be destroyed in the crossfire. or I could surrender and help negotiate a peace treaty that would benefit both our peoples. The hologram showed the Catherian fleet standing down and beginning peaceful negotiations. I chose surrender, Zektar said. Not because I was a coward, but because I finally understood what Admiral Clark had been trying to teach us. The humans were not our enemies. They were our teachers. The display showed the peace negotiations that followed, with humans offering surprisingly generous terms. The peace treaty was more favorable to us than anything we could have achieved through war, Zektar continued. Humans allowed us to keep our government, our territory, our way of life. They asked for only one thing in return, that we never again attack a species that had not attacked us first. A young soldier asked, "Do you regret surrendering, Commander?" Zektar looked at him with wise, tired eyes. "Young warrior, I regret that it took me so long to understand what humans were offering us. They could have destroyed us, enslaved us, or conquered us. Instead, they chose to make us their allies." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Today, Catherian engineers work alongside human scientists," he said. "Our merchants trade freely with human colonies. Our children learn about human culture in school. The war that began with hatred ended with understanding." The old warrior turned back to face his audience. "That is why I tell you these stories," he said, "not to frighten you, but to help you understand the most important lesson of all. The humans taught us that true strength is not the power to destroy your enemies. It is the wisdom to turn your enemies into friends." The hologram showed current images of Catherian and human crews working together on joint projects throughout the galaxy. "The most bone-chilling account I can share is not of human fury but of human mercy," Zektar continued. "A species that can annihilate you but chooses not to. That is the ultimate expression of power. A species that defeats you in battle and then offers you friendship. That is the most dangerous enemy you can face because they force you to become better than you were." He walked toward the door one final time. "We attacked them thinking they were weak," Zektar said. "We discovered they were strong.